The morning air on planet Zenthara carried the sweet scent of blooming crystal flowers as Professor Elak made his way across the sprawling campus of the Galactic Educational Institute. His forearms carried data tablets while his tall, blue-skinned frame moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had walked these paths for over 200 years. The Zenthari professor had seen many changes in galactic education during his long career, but nothing had prepared him for what waited in his office that morning. A red priority message blinked on his desk display. The seal of the Galactic Education Council glowed at the top of the document, indicating this was not a request but a mandate. Hilak's large oval eyes scanned the official communication with growing confusion. All educational institutions across the galaxy would now be required to include human historical studies in their standard curriculum. The directive came directly from the Federation Council and would take effect within one standard galactic month. Attached were preliminary teaching materials and a stern warning about following approved content guidelines exactly. Elak leaned back in his chair, his secondary arms drumming against the desk surface. Humans had only joined the Galactic Federation 3 years ago. They were newcomers, barely out of their primitive stage of development. Most species required centuries of careful evaluation before being considered for Federation membership, yet humans had been fast-tracked through the process in record time. The professor had met a few humans during diplomatic functions. They seemed pleasant enough, if somewhat energetic and unpredictable. Their technology was crude by galactic standards, and their understanding of advanced sciences was limited. What could possibly be so important about their history that it required mandatory study across all Federation worlds? Opening the attached materials, Elak began reviewing what he would need to teach his students. The content seemed oddly sparse for a comprehensive historical overview. There were sections on human art, music, and cultural achievements, brief mentions of their technological development and social evolution. But something felt wrong about the presentation. Large portions of the timeline contained gaps marked with phrases like classification pending review or cultural sensitivity guidelines apply. Entire centuries seemed to be glossed over with vague references to periods of social adjustment and technological advancement phases. For a species that claimed to have detailed historical records, the approved materials were surprisingly thin. Elak tried accessing the Federation's central database to fill in the missing information. His academic credentials should have granted him access to basic historical data for any Federation species. Instead, he encountered layer after layer of restricted access warnings. Every attempt to dig deeper into human history was met with security blocks and requests for higher clearance levels. This was unprecedented. In his 2 centuries of teaching galactic history, Elak had never encountered such extensive restrictions on basic historical information. Even the most sensitive cultural topics of warrior species like the Krellians or the complex mating rituals of the Vorthak were available for academic study. Why were human historical records different? Growing more curious, Elak reached out to colleagues at other institutions. His friend Dent, a Helvarian professor at the military academy on Rigel 7, responded within hours. The message was brief and troubling. Elak, I cannot discuss human history over standard communication channels. If you must know more, meet me at the old observatory tonight after the 3rd moon rises. Come alone and tell no one of this meeting. The professor stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. Dent was known for his steady, logical approach to everything. The Helvarian species was naturally cautious, but they were not given to paranoia or dramatic secrecy. If Dent was acting this way about human history, something was seriously wrong. That evening, Elak made his way to the abandoned observatory at the edge of campus. The ancient building had once been used for stellar navigation research but had been empty for decades since newer facilities were built. Dent was already waiting in the shadows, his crystalline form barely visible in the dim light of Zenthara's 3 moons. Thank you for coming, Dent said, his voice carrying the harmonic overtones typical of his species. I could not risk discussing this through normal channels. The Education Council monitors all communications regarding human historical data. Why all the secrecy? Elak asked. They are just another Federation species. What could be so dangerous about their past? Dent's crystalline body flickered with nervous energy. I made the mistake of requesting complete human historical records for my own course preparation. Within days, I was visited by Federation security agents who strongly suggested I limit my research to approved materials only. That makes no sense. Academic freedom is protected under Federation law. Not when it comes to humans, apparently. Dent moved closer, lowering his harmonic voice to barely audible levels. Elak, I managed to access some restricted files before they cut off my access. What I found? It changed how I view everything about human Federation membership. The professor felt a chill run through his nervous system. What did you discover? I cannot tell you directly. If they detect that I have shared classified information, both of our careers will be over. But I can give you a warning. Do not dig too deep into human military history. Do not try to understand their concepts of warfare. And whatever you do not attempt to comprehend their casualty statistics. Before Elak could ask for clarification, Dent turned and walked quickly into the darkness. The professor stood alone in the ancient observatory, staring up at the stars and wondering what secrets could be so terrible that the Federation would suppress them completely. Over the following days, Elak noticed other disturbing signs. 3. Professors from different institutions quietly requested transfers away from human history courses. The Galactic Library on Centauri Prime announced that their human historical section would be temporarily closed for reorganization. Most telling of all, enrollment in xenopsychology courses focusing on human behavior was suddenly restricted to students with advanced security clearances. As Elak prepared his first lesson on human history, using only the sanitized, approved materials, he realized that he was about to teach his students a carefully constructed lie. The question was whether he had the courage to discover the truth that the Federation was so desperate to hide. The sound of student voices in the hallway reminded him that classes would begin soon. Whatever secrets lay buried in human history, his students deserved better than propaganda disguised as education. But first, he needed to understand what he was really dealing with. That night, Elak began planning his own investigation into the truth about humanity. The underground archives of the Xanthari Historical Society smelled of dust and old data crystals. Professor Elak moved carefully between towering shelves of information storage devices, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber beneath the capital city. Most academics never visited these forgotten repositories, preferring the convenience of digital databases. But Elak had learned that sometimes the most important truths were hidden in places no one thought to look. He had spent 3 sleepless nights developing his research strategy. Official channels were clearly compromised, monitored, or restricted. If he wanted real information about human history, he would need to find sources that predated Federation oversight. The Xanthari archives contained historical records from thousands of species collected over millions of years before the Federation even existed. Using his academic credentials, Elak accessed the human section of the archives. To his surprise, the collection was extensive. Apparently, human traders and diplomats had been sharing historical data with various species for decades before their official Federation membership. These records had been filed away and forgotten, never subjected to the sanitization process that affected official educational materials. The first document he opened made him pause in confusion. It was a statistical analysis of something called World War II that had occurred on the human homeworld about 300 years ago. The numbers seemed impossible. According to the data, over 70 million humans had died in a single conflict, lasting 6 years. Elak checked the conversion calculations 3 times, certain he had made an error. The math was correct. In one war, humans had lost more individuals than most galactic civilizations had in their entire recorded histories. And this was just one conflict among many listed in the chronological database. Elak opened another file, this one detailing something called the 100 Years' War. Despite its name, the conflict had actually lasted 116 years, involving multiple generations of humans who were born, lived and died knowing nothing but warfare. The professor tried to imagine what kind of species could sustain a conflict longer than most galactic civilizations had existed. As he continued reading, a disturbing pattern emerged. Human history was not just marked by occasional conflicts, as was normal for most species. It was essentially one continuous series of wars, battles, and violent struggles with brief periods of peace scattered between them. The approved educational materials had somehow managed to hide this fundamental aspect of human civilization. The scope of human warfare was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Most species fought simple conflicts over resources or territory, usually resolved within days or weeks through superior tactics or technology. Human wars involved complex strategies, multiple battlefronts, sophisticated logistic systems, and innovative weapons development that continued throughout the conflicts. Lack discovered records of humans fighting simultaneously on different continents, coordinating attacks across vast distances and developing new military technologies in the middle of active campaigns. They seemed to treat warfare as both an art and a science, constantly learning and adapting their methods based on experience. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. As Ilak dug deeper into human military history, he realized that the vast majority of their conflicts were not fought against external threats or alien species. Humans primarily fought other humans. The archives contained detailed records of civil wars, revolutionary conflicts, religious battles, and ideological struggles that had torn human civilization apart repeatedly throughout their history. They fought over resources, beliefs, territory, political systems, and sometimes for reasons that seemed incomprehensible to non-human minds. One document described a conflict called the American Civil War, where humans from the same nation fought each other for 4 years over fundamental disagreements about their society. Another detailed something called the French Revolution, where humans systematically executed their own leaders and replaced them with new ones, who were then executed. In turn, the professor found his hands shaking as he read about human tactics and strategies. They had developed concepts like total war, where entire populations became targets. They created weapons designed specifically to cause maximum casualties. They pioneered psychological warfare techniques that broke enemy morale before physical battles even began. What terrified Ilak most was the clinical precision with which humans documented their own violent history. These were not the glorified legends of warrior species who celebrated battle. These were detailed, analytical studies of warfare conducted with scientific methodology. Humans studied their own violence the way other species studied mathematics or astronomy. He found military academies where humans systematically taught the principles of warfare to new generations. Strategy manuals that read like scientific papers. Historical analyses of battles that examined every decision and outcome with scholarly precision. Humans had turned the art of killing into an academic discipline. As the night wore on, Ilak discovered that human technological advancement was directly linked to their military development. Medical techniques that saved lives had been developed to treat battlefield injuries. Communication systems that connected their civilization had been created to coordinate military operations. Transportation methods that allowed them to explore. Space had been refined through military logistics requirements. The archives contained technical specifications for human weapons that made the professor physically ill, devices capable of destroying entire cities in seconds, chemical agents that could kill millions of people, biological weapons designed to target specific genetic markers. And all of this had been developed by a species that was barely 2 centuries into their space age. By dawn, Ilak understood why the Federation was hiding human history. By galactic standards, humans were not just a violent species. They were a species that had elevated violence to an art form, studied it like a science, and used it to drive their entire technological and social development. The approved educational materials portrayed humans as a peaceful species that had overcome their primitive past to join the galactic community. The truth was that humans were probably the most militarily sophisticated species in the galaxy, despite being among the newest members of the Federation. As Ilak walked home through the early morning light, he struggled with a terrifying question. If humans were this dangerous, why had the Federation not only accepted them as members, but fast-tracked their membership process? The answer, when it finally came to him, was more frightening than anything he had discovered in the archives. The Federation had not accepted humans despite their violent history. They had accepted them because of it. But that raised an even more disturbing question. What threat could be so terrible that the Federation needed humanity's capacity for warfare? The Galactic Military Archive on Station Omega-7 was a place few civilians ever visited. Professor Ilak stood before the massive security scanner, hoping his emergency research permit would grant him access to the information he needed. After discovering the true scope of human warfare, he knew he had to understand how their military capabilities compared to other Federation species. The security system approved his credentials with a soft chime. Admiral Korex, a grizzled Vorthan officer with decades of military experience, met him at the entrance. The Admiral's scaled hide showed the deep scarring typical of career military personnel, and his expression suggested he was not entirely comfortable with this meeting. Professor, I agreed to this consultation because your research permit came with very high-level authorization codes, Korex said, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone used to choosing words carefully. But I must warn you that some of the information you have requested is deeply classified for good reason. Ilak followed the Admiral through corridors lined with displays showing Federation naval vessels and battle honors from conflicts stretching back thousands of years. I understand the sensitivity, Admiral, but I need to know how human military doctrine compares to established Federation standards. Korex stopped at a secured viewing room and activated privacy shields before speaking again. Professor, I have been studying military strategy for over 60 years. I have analyzed the tactical approaches of every Federation species. What I discovered about human warfare kept me awake for months. The Admiral activated a holographic display showing comparative military statistics. Most Federation species approach conflict as a regrettable necessity to be ended as quickly as possible. We fight to achieve specific, limited objectives. We avoid casualties when possible. We seek negotiated settlements when practical. The display shifted to show human military data. Humans approach warfare as an intellectual challenge to be mastered completely. They study not just how to win battles, but how to win them more efficiently, more decisively, and more permanently than their previous victories. Ilak stared at the comparative statistics. Human casualty rates in conflicts were often 10 times higher than comparable Federation engagements, but their success rates were also significantly higher. More disturbing was the fact that humans seemed to learn from defeats as effectively as from victories, often emerging from lost battles with improved tactics and strategies. Admiral, these numbers suggest that humans are naturally more aggressive than other Federation species. Is that accurate? Korex manipulated the display to show detailed tactical analyses. Aggressive is the wrong word, Professor. Humans are thorough. When they decide to fight, they commit completely to victory regardless of cost. Most species fight until the outcome becomes clear, then negotiate. Humans fight until the enemy surrenders unconditionally or is completely destroyed. The professor examined records of human military innovations developed during active conflicts. Advanced communication systems, improved medical techniques, enhanced transportation methods, and sophisticated weapons technologies had all been created under battlefield conditions. It appears that humans use warfare as a catalyst for technological advancement. That is correct. Most species develop technology first, then adapt it for military use if necessary. Humans develop military technology first, then find civilian applications afterward. Their entire technological infrastructure is built on foundations of military research. Admiral Korex activated another display showing human military education systems. Professor, humans operate institutions they call military academies, where they systematically teach the science of warfare to their brightest minds. They have universities dedicated to studying conflict theory. They write academic papers analyzing battles the way other species study physics or biology. Ilak studied the detailed curriculum from human military schools. The level of sophistication was staggering. Humans had developed mathematical models for predicting battle outcomes, psychological profiles for breaking enemy morale, and logistical systems for supporting military operations across vast distances and time periods. This suggests that humans treat warfare as an academic discipline rather than a necessary evil. Exactly. And that makes them uniquely dangerous, Professor. When most species go to war, they rely on instinct, tradition, or basic tactical training. When humans go to war, they apply centuries of accumulated knowledge, scientific methodology, and intellectual analysis to the problem of defeating their enemies. The Admiral showed ELAC records of human military simulations and training exercises. Even during peacetime, humans constantly practiced warfare, running elaborate scenarios to test strategies and identify weaknesses in their own capabilities. They studied historical battles from their own past and from other species, constantly refining their understanding of military principles. Admiral, if humans are this sophisticated militarily, why are their weapons technologies still relatively primitive by Federation standards? Korex smiled grimly. Professor, human weapons technology is not primitive. It is optimized for different objectives than Federation military systems. Our weapons are designed to disable enemy vessels with minimal casualties, allowing for negotiated settlements. Human weapons are designed to destroy enemies completely and permanently. The display showed comparative weapons analysis data that made ELAC's blood run cold. Human weapon systems prioritized devastating effectiveness over precision strikes. Their defensive systems were designed to protect military assets even at the cost of civilian populations. Their strategic doctrines assumed that any conflict would escalate to maximum intensity. But surely their membership in the Federation has moderated these tendencies? On the contrary, Professor. Since joining the Federation, humans have been quietly studying our military technologies and integrating them with their own tactical doctrines. They are becoming more dangerous, not less. Admiral Korex activated a final display showing recent human military developments. In the 3 years since joining the Federation, humans have requested detailed information about the combat capabilities of every member species. They have studied our weapons, our tactics, our defensive strategies, and our technological limitations. ELAC realized the implications immediately. They are learning how to fight us. More than that, Professor, they are learning how to defeat us. Every piece of information we have shared with them in the spirit of Federation cooperation has been analyzed through their military perspective. They now understand our weaknesses better than most of our own military leaders. The professor sat in stunned silence as the full scope of human capabilities became clear. They were not just a violent species that had been reformed through Federation membership. They were a species that had spent their entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of warfare, and they were now applying that expertise to understanding their new galactic neighbors. Admiral, there is something I must ask. If humans are this dangerous, why were they accepted into the Federation at all? Korex deactivated the displays and looked directly at ELAC. Professor, that question requires a security clearance level that I do not possess. But I will say this. The decision to accept human membership came directly from the Federation Council, with no military consultation. The speed of their acceptance was unprecedented. As ELAC left the military archive, he realized that his investigation had uncovered something far more disturbing than sanitized historical records. Humanity had not been reformed by joining the Federation. Instead, they were systematically studying how to apply their military expertise to their new galactic environment. The question was whether they were preparing to defend the Federation or to conquer it. The lecture hall buzzed with quiet conversation as Professor ELAC's advanced students took their seats. These were not ordinary undergraduates, but the brightest minds from across the galaxy, selected for their analytical abilities and intellectual curiosity. Representatives from 12 different species filled the curved rows of seating, their diverse forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that normally filled ELAC with pride in galactic diversity. Today, however, he felt only apprehension. ELAC had made his decision 3 sleepless nights ago. Academic integrity demanded that he provide his students with accurate information, regardless of political consequences. If the Federation wanted to suppress human history, they would need to find better reasons than maintaining comfortable illusions. Today we begin our study of human civilization, Elak announced, activating the room's holographic display system. I must inform you that the approved curriculum materials for this subject are incomplete and, in some cases, deliberately misleading. What I am about to share with you represents my own research into actual human historical records. The students exchanged glances. Beth, a young Galarian whose species valued direct confrontation, leaned forward with interest. Her crystalline features reflected the light in patterns that indicated excitement. Beside her, Tam, a Vorthan whose people had never experienced warfare, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Professor?" asked Dev, a Helvarian student whose harmonic voice carried undertones of concern. "Are you suggesting that the Education Council has provided false information?" "I am suggesting that they have provided incomplete information for what they believe are good reasons. Whether those reasons justify hiding the truth is something each of you must decide for yourself." Elak activated the first display, showing a timeline of human history marked with red indicators. These markers represent major military conflicts in human civilization. As you can see, there are quite a few of them. The holographic timeline filled the air above the students, stretching from ancient times to the present. Red markers covered nearly every century, with some periods showing multiple concurrent conflicts. The overall effect was of a civilization defined by almost constant warfare. "This cannot be accurate," whispered Jen, a peaceful Maloran whose species resolved disputes through collective meditation. The approved materials indicated that humans had occasional minor conflicts, similar to most developing civilizations. The approved materials are designed to present humans as a species that has evolved beyond their violent past, Ilak replied. "The reality is more complex. Human civilization has been shaped by warfare to a degree unprecedented in galactic history." He expanded the display to show details of individual conflicts. The students fell silent as casualty figures appeared beside each marker. Numbers that represented millions of deaths, years-long campaigns, and destruction on scales that most galactic species had never imagined. "Professor," Beth said, her Galarian features flickering with patterns that indicated deep thought, "my people understand warfare through ritual combat. These numbers suggest something far beyond ritual or even territorial disputes." "Correct. Humans have developed warfare into both an art and a science. They study it academically, teach it systematically, and innovate constantly to improve their effectiveness." Elak showed them records of human military academies, strategic manuals, and battlefield analyses that read like scientific papers. The students studied the materials with growing amazement and horror. "They treat warfare like mathematics," observed Lin, a Zenthari student whose species valued intellectual pursuits above all else. "These tactical analyses are more sophisticated than most of our scientific research." "And that brings us to an important point," Elak continued, shifting the display to show human technological development. "Most species develop technology for civilian purposes and adapt it for defense when necessary. Humans develop military technology first and find civilian applications afterward." The timeline showed how human advances in medicine, communication, transportation, and even entertainment had originated from military research programs. Technologies that now benefited human civilization had been created originally to help them kill each other more efficiently. "This is disturbing," Tam said, his Vorthan features showing signs of distress. "How can a species that has spent so much energy on destruction ever be trusted as peaceful neighbors?" "That is an excellent question," Elak replied. "And it leads us to another troubling discovery. Since joining the Federation, humans have systematically requested detailed information about the military capabilities of every member species." The professor showed them records of human information requests, technical specifications they had acquired, and strategic analyses they had conducted of Federation defense systems. The pattern was unmistakable. Humans were studying how to fight their new allies. "Perhaps they are simply trying to understand our defensive capabilities so they can better coordinate their own defenses," suggested Ray, an optimistic Qualian whose species always looked for positive interpretations. Perhaps. Or perhaps they are doing what they have always done, analyzing potential enemies and developing strategies to defeat them. The classroom fell silent as the implications sank in. These students represented the intellectual elite of their respective civilizations, and they were all reaching the same disturbing conclusion. "Professor," Beth asked, "if humans are this dangerous, why were they accepted into the Federation so quickly?" "That is a question I have been unable to answer through official channels. The normal evaluation process for new species takes decades, or even centuries. Humans were fast-tracked through membership in less than 5 years. Someone wanted them in the Federation badly enough to skip normal safety protocols," Lynn observed. "But who would have that kind of authority?" Dev wondered. "And why would they take such a risk?" Before Elak could respond, the classroom doors opened and 3 figures in Federation security uniforms entered. The lead agent, a tall Zenthari with official credentials visible on his uniform, approached the professor's podium. "Professor Elak, you are required to accompany us immediately. For consultation with the Federation Council, your students are dismissed, and all materials from this lecture are to be sealed pending security review." The students watched in stunned silence as their professor was escorted from the room. The security agents moved with practiced efficiency, collecting data tablets and sealing the holographic display system. As they left the building, one of the agents spoke quietly to Elak. "Professor, you have accessed information that is classified at the highest levels of Federation security. The Council will want to know how you obtained these materials and who else has seen them." "I am an academic researcher. Everything I showed, my students came from publicly available historical archives. Professor, nothing about human military capabilities is publicly available. If you accessed that information, someone with very high clearance levels provided it to you." As they approached the Federation Council building, Elak realized that his investigation had uncovered something far more significant than historical cover-ups. Someone in the highest levels of Federation government was actively managing the flow of information about human capabilities. The question was whether they were protecting the galaxy from humanity, or protecting humanity for some purpose the galaxy was not ready to understand. Either way, Elak was about to discover that some truths were considered too dangerous for academic freedom. The Federation Council chamber was a place where the fate of trillions of beings was decided daily. Professor Elak had never expected to stand in this vast spherical room, surrounded by the representatives of 1,000 worlds, facing questions that could determine not just his career, but the stability of galactic civilization itself. Council leader Thane materialized at the center of the chamber, his energy-based form crackling with the power accumulated over millions of years of existence. As one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, Thane had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. His presence alone indicated that Ilak's investigation had reached the highest levels of Federation concern. "Professor Elak of Zenthera," Thane's voice resonated through the chamber with harmonics that touched the hearing ranges of every species present. "You have accessed classified information regarding human military capabilities and shared this data with unauthorized individuals. The security implications are severe." Elak stood as straight as his four-armed frame allowed, drawing on 2 centuries of academic dignity. "Council leader, I accessed historical archives that were openly available to academic researchers. If this information is classified, perhaps the classification system needs to be reviewed." "The information itself is not classified, Professor. Your interpretation of its implications and your unauthorized analysis of current Federation security protocols are what concern us." Thane gestured, and holographic displays filled the space around them. Images of destroyed worlds, empty star systems, and the remnants of once great civilizations appeared in the air. Elak recognized none of them from his extensive studies of galactic history. "These images are from the Andromeda Galaxy, Professor, or rather what remains of it." The displays showed system after system of dead worlds, their surfaces scarred by weapons that left entire planets lifeless. Space stations hung empty and broken in orbit around stars that still burned but no longer supported any form of life. 15 years ago, Our deep space monitoring stations detected the complete cessation of all electromagnetic activity from Andromeda. An entire galaxy had gone silent in the span of less than 50 years. Elak stared at the images, struggling to comprehend the scale of destruction being shown. Council leader, what could possibly cause such widespread devastation? We sent investigation teams to find out. What they discovered changed everything about how we view our place in the universe. The displays shifted to show massive vessels unlike anything in Federation records. Dark, angular ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their surfaces covered with weapons systems that defied conventional understanding of physics and engineering. An extragalactic force of unknown origin systematically destroyed every civilization in Andromeda. They did not negotiate, did not communicate, and showed no interest in resources or territory. They simply eliminated all intelligent life and moved on. But surely such a force would take millions of years to conquer an entire galaxy, Elak protested, his academic mind struggling with the timeline. Under normal circumstances, yes. But these beings do not fight like any species we understand. They appear to study each civilization they encounter, learn their weaknesses, and then develop weapons specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses with devastating efficiency. Thane manipulated the displays to show tactical analyses of the Andromedan civilizations. Every species in Andromeda was peaceful by our standards. They resolved conflicts through negotiation, economic pressure, or defensive actions designed to minimize casualties. When faced with an enemy that sought only their complete destruction, they had no effective response. The implications hit Elak like a physical blow. And you believe this force is heading for our galaxy? We know they are coming, Professor. Our monitoring stations have detected the same energy signatures in the void between galaxies moving steadily in our direction. Conservative estimates suggest they will reach our outer systems within 50 years. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the crisis became clear. Every peaceful civilization in the Federation faced the same fate as their Andromedan counterparts, unless they could find a way to fight an enemy that specialized in exploiting peaceful species. This is why humans were fast-tracked into Federation membership, Elak said, understanding flooding through his consciousness. Correct. When humanity's application reached us, we were desperate for any species that might be capable of effective military resistance. Humans were not just willing to fight. They had spent their entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of warfare. Thane brought up displays showing human military capabilities compared to the Andromedan invasion force. Professor, humans understand concepts that no other Federation species has ever needed to learn. Total warfare, strategic destruction, psychological operations, and most importantly, the willingness to accept massive casualties in order to achieve complete victory. But surely the Federation's combined technological advantages would be sufficient to mount an effective defense. Our technology is superior, but it is designed for civilized warfare between rational opponents. Humans have something we have never developed: the intellectual framework for fighting an enemy that cannot be negotiated with, reasoned with, or defeated through limited conflict. The council leader activated one final display showing human military innovation since joining the Federation. In just 3 years, humans had integrated galactic technology with their own tactical doctrines, creating weapon systems and strategic concepts that Federation military analysts had never imagined. Professor, when this threat arrives, the survival of every peaceful species in the galaxy will depend on humanity's willingness and ability to fight with methods that other species cannot comprehend or stomach. Elak understood now why human history had to remain classified. If the general population knew that Federation survival strategy depends on unleashing human military capabilities, it would cause galaxy-wide panic. Worse than panic, Professor. It would tear the Federation apart just when unity is most needed. Most species joined the Federation to escape the need for military solutions to their problems. Learning that their survival depends on the most militarily sophisticated species in galactic history would shatter their fundamental beliefs about civilization. So you maintain the fiction that humans are a reformed, peaceful species. while secretly preparing them to fight a war unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. Thane's energy form flickered with what might have been exhaustion. Professor, we are asking humans to do something that goes against everything the Federation represents. We are asking them to be what they have always been, warriors. But we are asking them to be warriors in defense of species that would be horrified by the methods required for victory. The profound moral complexity of the situation weighed on Elak's mind. The Federation was built on principles of peaceful cooperation and mutual understanding. Yet their survival might depend on a species that had elevated warfare to an art form. What happens when this conflict is over, Council Leader, assuming humanity succeeds in defeating this threat? That, Professor, is a question we have not been able to answer. A species capable of defeating an enemy that destroyed an entire galaxy will be unlike anything the Federation has ever dealt with. We can only hope that humans retain enough of their peaceful aspirations to remain our allies, rather than our conquerors. As Elak was escorted back to his campus, he understood that his investigation had uncovered the most dangerous secret in galactic history. The Federation was not just hiding human military capabilities from its citizens. They were gambling the future of galactic civilization on humanity's willingness to fight a war that peaceful species could never win. The next morning, Elak returned to his classroom and began teaching the approved, sanitized version of human history. His students listened politely as he described human art, culture, and technological achievements while carefully omitting any mention of their martial heritage. But as he taught, Elak couldn't stop thinking about the images from Andromeda. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, an enemy was approaching that had already destroyed billions of civilizations. When they arrived, the galaxy's survival would depend on humanity doing what they had always done best, fighting with a skill and determination that no other species could match. The irony was not lost on him. For millions of years, galactic civilization had evolved beyond the need for warfare, developing sophisticated methods of conflict resolution that made violence unnecessary. They had built a society based on cooperation, understanding, and peaceful coexistence. Yet when faced with their greatest existential threat, they had turned to the one species that had never abandoned the ancient arts of war. That evening, Elak received a message from his student Beth, the young Jalarian who had shown such interest in human military tactics. She had clearly been researching on her own despite the official restrictions. Professor, I have been thinking about what you showed us before the security agents arrived. If humans are as militarily sophisticated as the evidence suggests, then their integration into Federation society represents either our greatest opportunity or our greatest danger. I suspect the truth is probably both. Elak deleted the message without responding, but Beth's words haunted him. She was right, of course. Humanity represented both salvation and potential doom for galactic civilization. They were the sword that might defend the Federation from external threats, but swords were dangerous tools that could easily turn against those who wielded them. Over the following weeks, Elak noticed subtle changes throughout the Federation. Military budgets were quietly increased across member species. Advanced weapons research programs were established with minimal public announcement. Most telling, of all human advisors were being assigned to military commands throughout Federation space, ostensibly to provide cultural exchange and tactical consultation. The professor realized that while he had been teaching sanitized human history to protect galactic sensibilities, the Federation leadership was already implementing humanity's military doctrine throughout their defense systems. The galaxy was being prepared for a war that its citizens didn't even know was coming. One night, as Elak walked across the campus of the Galactic Educational Institute, he encountered a human exchange student named David who was studying xenobiology. The young man seemed troubled, staring up at the stars with an expression that reminded Elak of his own recent nights of sleepless worry. Professor, may I ask you something? David said. I've been studying the military history of various Federation species, and something doesn't make sense. Most galactic civilizations seem to have evolved beyond the need for large-scale warfare centuries or even millennia ago. So why is my government suddenly so interested in Federation military capabilities? Elak looked at the young human, seeing, in his eyes, the same intellectual curiosity that had driven the professor's own investigation. David was bright enough to recognize the patterns, but lacked the classified information to understand their true significance. David, sometimes the greatest threats to civilization come from directions we never expect to look. Your people have skills that may prove valuable in ways that are not yet apparent to the general public. The human student nodded slowly. Professor, I've read enough of my own species' history to know that we're not exactly the peaceful explorers that Federation propaganda makes us out to be. We're good at fighting. Very good. The question is what we're being prepared to fight. As David walked away, Elak realized that humanity itself was beginning to understand their true role in Federation society. They were too intelligent and too experienced with warfare to remain ignorant of the preparations being made around them. Soon they would demand to know why their military expertise was suddenly so valuable. When that happened, the careful balance of secrets and half-truths that held Federation society together would collapse. The galaxy would learn that their peaceful civilization was about to face an enemy that could only be defeated through methods that contradicted everything they believed about civilized behavior. Standing alone under the alien stars, Professor Elak understood that he had witnessed the end of an era. The age of peaceful galactic civilization was drawing to a close, whether they won or lost the coming war. If they lost, all intelligent life in the galaxy would be extinguished. If they won, it would be because they had unleashed humanity's capacity for warfare on a scale that would transform them into something the galaxy had never seen before. Either way, the universe was about to change forever, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The professor returned to his office and began preparing his next lecture on human cultural achievements, knowing that each sanitized lesson brought them one day closer to the moment when the comfortable lies would no longer be sufficient to maintain galactic stability. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, an ancient enemy drew closer to their next target, unaware that this time they would face defenders who had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of total warfare. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met truly immovable resolve.